"Status report," Commander Vex Tauros demanded, drumming his 4 fingers against the command chair's crystalline surface. The bridge of the galactic research vessel Immortal buzzed with activity as his crew prepared for their latest conquest. Scientific expedition. "Third planet from the local star, Commander," Science Officer Nova Wren announced, her silver eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Primitive biological signatures detected across all continents. Nothing particularly noteworthy." She paused, suppressing what suspiciously sounded like a yawn. The massive research vessel hung in high orbit above the blue-green world like an oversized, chrome-plated suppository. Another day, another primitive planet to catalogue in their grand mission to document all survival-capable species in the galaxy. After 300 successful expeditions, the crew of the Immortal had developed what one might call a bit of an attitude. "Wonderful," Vex drawled, stretching his elongated limbs. "I suppose we should go through the motions. Standard protocol and all that bureaucratic nonsense. Officer Wren, please grace us with your preliminary analysis." Nova flicked through her data screens with practiced boredom. Atmospheric composition suitable for carbon-based life. Multiple species present, but nothing approaching our level of advancement. No artificial satellites, no quantum communications, not even a proper orbital defense grid. She snorted. How do they even survive? "Probably still fighting over shiny rocks," Security Chief Cade Zenith chuckled from his station. Built like a mountain of muscle and cybernetic enhancements, Cade had seen enough primitive worlds to last several lifetimes. "Want to bet they haven't even achieved nuclear fusion?" The bridge crew shared a collective laugh. After all, they represented the pinnacle of galactic evolution, beings who had conquered death itself through genetic engineering and technological enhancement. What could this backwater mudball possibly teach them? "Very well," Commander Vex sighed dramatically. "Send down the initial survey drones, standard grid pattern. Let's catalogue whatever passing excuse for life exists down there and move on. I have a dinner reservation at the Centaurian Crystal Palace next week that I simply cannot miss." The drones deployed, sleek silver spheres descending through the atmosphere. The crew settled in for what they expected to be another mundane survey mission. Their sensors picked up millions of tiny life forms, most barely registering on their consciousness scale. "Would you look at that?" Nova remarked, pointing to a cluster of readings. "Some of these creatures are absolutely minuscule, barely a few millimeters in length, yet they make up significant portions of the biomass." She shook her head. "How tragically inefficient. Nothing that small could possibly be relevant to our survival database." Commander Vex nodded sagely. "Mark them as a footnote in the report. Clearly this planet is another evolutionary dead end. Though I suppose we should do our due diligence and send down a ground team." He smirked. "Who knows? Maybe we'll find something amusing to share at the next Galactic Scientific Conference." Little did they know, their dismissive attitudes were about to cost them dearly. The tiny life forms they so casually dismissed had spent millions of years perfecting the art of survival. And they were about to teach these advanced beings a lesson in humility they would never forget. That is, if they survived long enough to learn it. "This environment suit feels absolutely ridiculous," Nova Wren complained, stomping her feet on the grassy terrain. "As if anything on this primitive rock could possibly penetrate our bioshields." The landing party consisted of Nova, Security Chief Cade, and their field researcher, Dr. Lex Bren, who was currently waving his sensor wand around like a child with a new toy. The morning sun cast long shadows across what appeared to be a clearing in a temperate forest region. "Protocol is protocol," Cade responded, though he'd already disengaged his helmet's atmospheric filters. "Even if these— what did you call them, Lex?" "Insects," Dr. Bren replied, not looking up from his readings. "Fascinating, really. They seem to be everywhere. Though I can't fathom why evolution would favor such— Ouch! The distinguished scientist hopped on one foot, frantically brushing at his ankle. "Something bit me! Through the suit!" Impossible, Nova scoffed, then froze as she noticed movement at her feet. A stream of small red creatures was flowing past them like a living river. What in the 7 moons of Xerxes? Cade crouched down, his enhanced vision zooming in on the creatures. They appear to be carrying objects, plant matter, fragments of other deceased life forms. He paused, tracking the line of insects to its source. And they're all heading to that mound over there. The team approached what looked like a simple dirt hill about waist-high. Dr. Brenn's sensor wand suddenly began chirping frantically. "This can't be right. I'm detecting a complex network of tunnels extending at least 20 meters below the surface." "Nonsense," Nova declared, taking a step onto the mound. "Your equipment must be Ah!" Thousands of ants swarmed up her legs, their mandibles somehow finding gaps in her supposedly impenetrable suit. As she stumbled backward, Cade's combat training kicked in. He raised his pulse rifle, then hesitated. The targets were too small and too numerous. "Hold still!" Dr. Brenn shouted, fumbling with a canister on his belt. He sprayed Nova with a chemical deterrent, and the ants retreated, in perfect formation. Did you see that?" Nova gasped, still brushing phantom insects from her suit. "They moved like a trained military unit." Dr. Brenn had switched his sensor to maximum resolution, his professional detachment crumbling as data flooded his screen. "These tunnels, they have ventilation shafts, storage chambers, dedicated waste disposal areas. There's even something that appears to be a farm." "A what?" Cade and Nova asked simultaneously. "They're cultivating some kind of fungus in climate-controlled chambers with precise temperature and humidity regulation." Dr. Brenn's voice had taken on a note of hysteria. "This is technology. Primitive, yes, but undeniably technology." As if to underscore his point, a column of larger ants emerged from the mound, carrying what appeared to be injured workers. They moved with purpose toward a specific tunnel entrance, which Brenn's sensors identified as a medical chamber. That's impossible," Nova whispered, her silver eyes wide. "Their brain capacity couldn't possibly—" "Look!" Cade pointed to where 2 groups of ants were working together to move a twig that was clearly too heavy for either group alone. "They're cooperating, problem-solving, using tools." Dr. Brenn was practically dancing with excitement now. "And this is just one colony. My sensors are detecting similar structures every few hundred meters, all connected by pheromone trails. It's a network, a civilization." A shadow passed overhead, causing them to look up. A large winged insect hovered nearby, its compound eyes seeming to study them with alien intelligence. "I think," Nova said slowly, "we may need to revise our initial assessment of this planet's evolutionary advancement." The wasp buzzed once, as if in agreement, then zipped away toward its own nest, which, they would soon discover, held horrors that would make this ant colony look like a luxury resort. "Commander Vex needs to see this," Cade declared, already backing away from the mound. "But first, I need to requisition some serious pest control equipment from the ship." Dr. Brenn laughed nervously. "I don't think ordinary pest control is going to cut it, Chief. Look behind you." Where there had been empty ground moments before, a new column of ants was emerging, larger, with massive mandibles. And they did not look pleased about the intrusion into their territory. "Perhaps," Nova suggested, her scientific arrogance finally cracking, "we should make a tactical retreat?" No one argued with that suggestion. "Commander, you need to see this footage." Nova Wren's voice quivered as she projected the day's recordings onto the bridge's main screen. The entire command crew watched, transfixed, as images of their continued exploration played out before them. Commander Vex Toros leaned forward, his usual smirk replaced by an expression of growing concern. The footage showed a massive structure suspended from a tree branch, swarming with black and yellow striped insects. "These wasps," Dr. Brenn narrated, "are building their nest using a paper-like material they manufacture themselves. They chew wood fibers, mix them with their saliva, and create a waterproof construction material that rivals our own basic synthetics. That's disturbing, Vex admitted, watching as the wasps methodically expanded their nest, each working with precise coordination. But surely they're just following basic genetic programming. Watch this next part, Cade interrupted, fast-forwarding to another sequence. The footage showed a wasp encountering an obstacle while carrying building materials. Instead of mindlessly trying to push through, it stopped, seemed to consider the situation, then flew around to find an alternate route. Problem-solving, Nova whispered. Individual decision-making. The footage shifted to a new scene, this one causing several crew members to physically recoil. A creature nearly as long as their forearms perched on a branch, its triangular head swiveling to track their movements with unsettling precision. The locals call this a praying mantis, Dr. Bren explained, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and fascination. We observed it hunting. It demonstrates planning, patience, and strategic thinking that, he swallowed hard, that rivals our own military tactical systems. The recording showed the mantis perfectly still, waiting as a smaller flying insect approached. Its attack was so fast, their high-speed cameras barely captured the movement. The precision was surgical, the execution flawless. That's not the worst part, Cade added grimly. He signaled for the next clip to play. The same mantis had caught something larger, another of its own kind. The bridge crew watched in horror as the female mantis proceeded to devour her mate, while he was still alive and actively mating with her. By the eternal void, Commander Vex breathed. These creatures are monsters. Efficient monsters, Nova corrected, pulling up her data charts. Every species we've encountered shows remarkable adaptation to survival. The wasps, they have sting venom that can paralyze prey while keeping it alive as fresh food for their larvae. The ants, they practice sophisticated agriculture and animal husbandry, farming aphids for food and keeping them docile through chemical manipulation. Dr. Bren stepped forward, pulling up another hologram. We've documented over 50 different species just in this small survey area. Look at this spider's web. The image showed an intricate pattern of silk strands. The tensile strength of this material, proportional to size, is stronger than our best synthetic cables, and each web is precisely engineered to capture specific prey while minimizing material usage. That's nothing, Cade cut in, his military training evident in his grim assessment. Watch this. The next clip showed their encounter with a bombardier beetle. The small insect, when threatened, produced a boiling hot chemical spray through a complex internal reaction chamber. The spray reached temperatures of over 100 degrees Celsius, complete with an audible detonation. They have biological weapons, Cade concluded, natural chemical warfare capabilities that would make our military engineers weep with envy. The briefing continued, each new revelation more disturbing than the last. They watched footage of hornets coordinating attacks on much larger prey, termites building climate-controlled structures that dwarfed their own size, and assassin bugs that turned their victims' insides to liquid before drinking them. There's something else, Nova added, her voice barely above a whisper. Something we discovered in the latest scans. She pulled up a new data set. These creatures, they're not just surviving, they're evolving, adapting. Some species are developing resistance to our standard containment measures in a matter of hours. Commander Vex Taurus sat silently for a long moment, processing everything he'd seen. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all traces of its usual condescension. How many of these insects exist on this planet? Dr. Bren consulted his datapad. Conservative estimates suggest over 10 quintillion individuals across millions of species. To put that in perspective for every one of us, he paused, letting the number sink in. There are approximately 1 billion of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, a junior officer spoke up from her monitoring station. Should we abort the mission? Before anyone could respond, the ship's emergency lights began flashing. A security alert blared through the speakers. "Security breach in Lab Section 7, a panicked voice announced. "Containment failure. The specimens, they're... The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the sounds of chaos and screaming. Commander Vex Toros rose from his chair, his face ashen. What specimens were being held in Lab Section 7? Nova checked her terminal, then looked up with horror in her silver eyes. "Fire ants, sir, and they've already reached the ventilation system." The mighty research vessel Immortal, pride of the Galactic Scientific Fleet, suddenly felt very small indeed. And somewhere in the darkness of its maintenance tunnels, a tiny army was beginning to march. "Our equipment is gone," Research Assistant Mira Rex announced, staring at the empty clearing where they'd set up their ground-based scanning array just 12 hours ago. Not damaged, not stolen, gone. The morning sun revealed only scattered debris where their million-credit sensing equipment had stood. Dr. Bren crouched down, examining the remains with his portable scanner. His hands shook as he read the results. They ate it," he stammered. "The termites broke it down into digestible components overnight. Even the quantum crystalline processors, even the metal." Cade Zenith raised his pulse rifle nervously, scanning the perimeter. "That's not possible. Our materials are designed to resist corrosion from even the most aggressive atmospheric conditions." "Tell that to them." Nova pointed toward what appeared to be a massive hill in the distance. Except it wasn't just a hill. As they approached, the true scale of what they were seeing became apparent. The termite megalopolis rose 30 meters into the sky, its outer walls harder than concrete. Thermal imaging revealed a complex network of tunnels, chambers, and ventilation shafts that extended both up into the structure and deep underground. "Sweet mother of cosmic radiation," Mira whispered. "The architectural complexity, the structural engineering. It's perfect. No wasted space, optimal airflow, temperature regulation." Her voice trailed off as her scanner began mapping the interior. "Look at these support columns," Dr. Bren added, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his fear. "They've calculated load-bearing ratios that—" He reached out to touch one of the outer walls. "Don't!" Nova screamed, but it was too late. The wall crumbled under Bren's touch, and thousands of soldier termites poured out. Their mandibles were evolved for one purpose: to protect the colony at all costs. "Fall back!" Cade shouted, firing his pulse rifle. The energy blasts left small scorch marks on the termite mound, but seemed to have no effect on the insects themselves. They just kept coming, an endless wave of chitinous horror. Mira screamed as several termites breached her suit's joints, their powerful mandibles cutting through the supposedly indestructible material like it was paper. She collapsed, disappearing under a living carpet of insects. "Get to the transport!" Nova grabbed Dr. Bren's arm, dragging him away from the fascinating horror he couldn't stop staring at. Cade provided covering fire, though what he was covering from was anyone's guess. How do you suppress an enemy that numbers in the millions? They reached the transport just as a new horror emerged. The termites had begun dismantling it, piece by piece, carrying away components into their fortress. "That's our ride!" Cade bellowed, smashing insects with the butt of his rifle. "How are they breaking down titanium alloy that fast?" "They're not just breaking it down," Dr. Bren observed with horrified fascination. "They're repurposing it. Look." Through the gaps in the termite mound's walls, they could see their equipment being integrated into the structure. The insects were adapting their construction techniques in real time, incorporating the advanced materials into their architecture. "They're learning," Nova realized, "evolving their engineering capabilities based on exposure to our technology." A cracking sound from above made them all look up. The termites had started on the transport's support struts. "Run!" Cade shoved his companions clear as the vehicle collapsed, its pieces quickly disappearing into a sea of voracious insects. They fled, leaving behind not just their equipment and transport, but also their illusions about their technological superiority. somewhere in that massive structure, Mira's screams had already fallen silent. As they ran, Dr. Brenn's scanner picked up one final chilling detail. The termite colony was expanding. And it wasn't just growing larger, it was growing smarter. Commander Vex would need to know. That is, if they survived long enough to tell him what they'd seen. Behind them, the sound of millions of tiny mandibles continued their relentless work, building something new, something better, something that combined primitive biology with advanced technology in ways their supposedly superior minds had never imagined possible. The termites had stopped surviving. They had started innovating. "What do you mean they're dancing?" Commander Vex demanded, watching the live feed from the team's new observation post. They'd set up camp far from the termite incident, hoping to study what appeared to be a less aggressive species. "It's not just dancing," Nova explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It's mathematics, trigonometry, advanced spatial communication." She pointed to a bee performing a complex figure-8 pattern. "This one is telling the others about a flower field 3 kilometers away. The angle of the dance indicates direction relative to the sun, and the duration represents exact distance." Dr. Brenn, still shaken from their earlier encounter, monitored the data streams. "They're sharing more than locations. Watch this." The feed showed hundreds of bees moving in perfect synchronization, their bodies vibrating at specific frequencies. Waves of information passed through the colony faster than their most advanced quantum communications. "Hold on," Cade interrupted, adjusting the thermal imaging. "Something's approaching the hive, some kind of local predator." They watched as a large hornet approached the bee colony. Traditional data suggested this should have been a massacre. The hornet was larger, stronger, and more heavily armed than any individual bee. "Here we go," Nova whispered. "Watch their defense strategy." The first wave of bees emerged, but instead of attacking, they performed a complex series of movements. More bees joined, their bodies moving in perfect coordination. Commander Vex leaned forward. "They're raising the temperature?" "Precisely," Dr. Brenn confirmed. "They're creating a thermal weapon. When that hornet enters their kill zone—" He paused as the scene unfolded. The hornet, oblivious to the trap, flew into the mass of bees. Instantly, hundreds of workers surrounded it, their vibrating bodies generating heat through coordinated muscle movement. The temperature rose rapidly. 35 degrees, 40 degrees, 45 degrees. "They're cooking it alive," Cade breathed, "with precision temperature control just 1 degree below their own survival threshold. The hornet never stood a chance." When the bees dispersed, their victim had been perfectly executed through thermal warfare. "That's not the most impressive part," Nova added, pulling up new data. "Look at their chemical production facilities." The scans revealed complex glands producing an array of compounds, antibiotics, preservatives, structural materials, and chemical weapons. Each bee was a flying pharmaceutical lab, contributing to the colony's sophisticated chemical arsenal. "They're sharing these formulas," Dr. Brenn noted, "teaching each other. Look here." He highlighted a section where younger bees were being shown how to process nectar into different grades of honey, each with specific properties. Commander Vex watched in silence as the evidence mounted. These weren't just insects. They were chemists, architects, mathematicians, and warriors, all rolled into perfect cooperative units. "Sir!" A monitoring station lit up with alerts. Multiple signals approaching the hive. Different species, wasps, hornets, at least 3 distinct threats. They expected panic. Instead, they witnessed revolution. The bees emerged in battle formations they'd never seen before. Different squadrons took up positions, each with specific roles. Some carried chemical weapons, others prepared for thermal attacks, while scouts coordinated through their dance-based communications network. The battle that followed was unlike anything their military strategists could have conceived. The bees used every weapon in their arsenal, chemical, thermal, physical, with tactical precision that would make veteran commanders weep. "They're not just defending," Cade realized, his military training lending him insight. They're adapting their strategies in real time, learning from each attack, improving their techniques. When it was over, the hive stood unharmed. Their attackers lay defeated through a combination of tactics that demonstrated not just swarm intelligence, but true strategic thinking. "Commander," Nova said quietly, "we need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about intelligence. These creatures, they're not just surviving. They're innovating, evolving, perhaps even surpassing us." Before Commander Vex could respond, a new alert sounded. The bee colony was moving. Not fleeing, but advancing. And they were heading straight for the observation post. "They know we're watching," Dr. Bren whispered. "They've known all along, and now—" The first wave of bees appeared on the horizon, their formation perfect, their purpose clear. The revolution wasn't just about defending their hive anymore. It was about sending a message. "This is our last chance," Commander Vex announced to his remaining crew. "The Galactic Science Council demands specimens. We go in, collect what we need, and leave this cursed planet behind." The expedition had already lost 12 crew members. The termites had claimed 3, the wasps another 4. The rest had fallen to various encounters that no one liked to discuss. Yet here they were, preparing for one final collection attempt. "The containment units are ready," Nova reported, triple-checking the quantum-sealed containers. "These should hold them. Should." The landing party consisted of the core team, Commander Vex, Nova, Cade, and Dr. Bren. No one else volunteered. They'd all seen too much. Their transport touched down in a clearing, equipment ready. The plan was simple: collect representatives from 3 species, ants, bees, and wasps. Quick, clean, professional. The first sign that something was wrong came when Dr. Bren's scanner started picking up unusual movement patterns. The insects, they're coordinating, different species moving together. This isn't natural. Cade raised his upgraded pulse rifle, now loaded with specialized pesticide charges. "Doesn't matter. We have the equipment. We have the firepower. His words died as they saw it. Ants were forming living bridges, allowing wasps to cross between trees. Bees flew in formation with hornets. Termites emerged from the ground in spiral patterns, creating defensive structures in minutes. "They're working together," Nova whispered. "All of them. Every species." Commander Vex keyed his emergency communicator. "Bridge, prepare for emergency extraction. Full quarantine protocols." The response came back garbled, interrupted by screaming. "Commander, the fire ants! They've reached the bridge! They're in the environmental systems! They're everywhere!" A new sound filled the air, the beating of thousands of wings. The combined swarm rose like a living tide, blocking out the sun. Below, the ground itself seemed to move as millions of ants advanced in perfect military formation. "Back to the transport," Vex ordered, but it was too late. The insects had learned from every encounter. Wasps had already destroyed the engines with precision strikes. Ants were dismantling the landing gear. Even the quantum-sealed containers were being systematically compromised by acid-spraying beetles. "Look!" Dr. Bren pointed upward, his voice filled with awe and terror. Their ship was visible in orbit, but something was wrong. It was listing, its lights flickering. Nova checked her portable scanner. "The fire ants. They've reached the primary power core. They're building nests in the quantum containment chambers. The radiation, it's not killing them. They're adapting to it." The insects closed in. Not attacking, but herding them, directing them. The message was clear: leave or be destroyed. Commander Vex Tauros, pride of the Galactic Research Fleet, made the only call he could. "All crew, abandon ship. Emergency protocols. Get to the escape pods." They ran. Behind them, the transport collapsed under the weight of countless insects. Above, their mighty research vessel was being systematically disassembled by millions of tiny engineers. The escape pods were their last hope. As they launched, breaking through the atmosphere, Nova looked back at the blue-green world below. "We never stood a chance," she realized. We thought we were studying them. But they were studying us, Dr. Bren finished, learning our weaknesses, our technologies, our limits. Commander Vex watched as his ship, the Immortal, broke apart in orbit. Pieces of it would rain down on the planet below, providing new materials for the ever-adapting insect civilizations. "Send word to the Council," he ordered as their pods entered deep space. "This planet is off limits. Quarantine protocol maximum. No further research expeditions." "And if they ask why?" Cade questioned. Vex thought about the horrors they'd witnessed. The perfect cooperation, the ruthless efficiency, the endless adaptation. "Tell them we found something worse than death down there. We found evolution perfected." As the escape pods disappeared into the darkness of space, Earth's insects returned to their endless work of survival. They had faced the self-proclaimed apex species of the galaxy and sent them running. And they weren't finished evolving, not by a long shot.